everyone. Welcome back to the live stream for the last panel of the morning, and then we're going to have an amazing new set post-lunch. As a reminder, I'm Tanya Dua. I'm the Senior Technology Editor at LinkedIn News, and you can follow my newsletter by searching for Tech Stack on LinkedIn. Joining me now is Carmine.
Perfect.
And Jenny, and I'm going to give them both 2 seconds to introduce themselves and their companies real quick.
Excellent. My name is Carmine Visconti. Thank you for listening. And I'm the CEO of Quantive.
And I'm Jenny Podewils, co-founder and co-CEO of Leapsome, which is an AI-powered people platform that drives HR excellence in high-performing teams.
Carmine, what does Quantive do for people that don't know?
So we establish ourselves as the single source of truth for strategic initiatives, which in simple terms, we have applied artificial intelligence so that business leaders can ideate, execute, and adapt their own strategic initiatives as they go.
I think this is a great panel to sort of conclude our morning with, because all morning we've been talking about enterprise adoption. There's two, camps. One set that believes that, people are actually going from POC stage to implementation, and the other side that thinks it hasn't quite lived up to the hype. So where do you both stand on that? Just curious. I mean, obviously you cater to enterprises, so you would hope they are adopting it. But if you were being truthful, since that's one of your values, right, Carmine?
So that's a very good question, and I don't have a final answer. The reality is the universe of enterprises is very much split between those that you call it rightly so POC type of. Mm-hmm. They need an appetizer, and they need a series of compliance and works around the AI adaptation application. And then you also have another bucket of companies which are way more innovative, and therefore they're embracing AI at a very elevated speed. At the moment, I would tell you it's a 50-50 race between those, I would say, AI conscious vis-a-vis those that instead are more AI ready.
Jenny, do you have anything to add?
I think it's interesting because you ended your last panel on the question, what's going to be the big theme for next year? And I think we're going to see a big year of having conversations around what ultimately drives adoption, because I think we've seen great technology being developed and to some extent already implemented in companies, but we do see a massive adoption gap. And ultimately, AI is not just a technological revolution, it's also human evolution, and it needs very intentional change management to ultimately drive the adoption. So I think that's going to be a big theme, and I believe we're going to have not just conversations about implementation, but about actual adoption of the technology that we've implemented now.
You mentioned that was the last question in my last panel, but it was also, we talked about behavioral change in my very first panel with Ali Miller as well. But before we get to that, and I know you have a lot to say there, Carmine, how can AI-driven tools like yours help CEOs and HR leaders move from planning to active and effective execution? And do you have any examples where insights have turned into very strategic plans and measurable outcomes?
Yeah, so generally speaking, the problem we're trying to solve is to make it the entire strategic planning process something that is a little bit more enjoyable and less combustible within organization, right? It can be the year-end budget formulation all the way down to digital transformation, or quite a few clients are using a project as if let's make an AI company initiatives all around. And what we really do, we try to shrink the time to departure, which basically means allowing executive to iterate around the ideation of what that type of strategic initiative will look like. And once you have done it, which in itself, it's a lot of weeks and a lot of time being spent, there is an entire process of activation, which will subsequently, to your point, will lead to execution. What we have done, we have applied artificial intelligence so that it can escort you all along this painful process without, to our point, without removing the human component. Actually, we are amplifying the human component in the entire journey because without the human-led process, the process is not particularly well thought through. Instead, the combination of AI applications and their ability to resurface and to distinguish a data or a fact versus what is an hypothesis, and the right balance that you need to strike when you're trying to calibrate the type of strategic initiative you're going to go after, I think is the winning formula that allows executive to eventually pull out what we call the theory of victory, which in simple terms means having an ability to show non-linear growth.
Right, right. So you're saying have AI handle the, sort of dreary, cumbersome
Correct.
tasks and make them automated, but still have a human in the loop.
Totally, yes.
So, Jenny, Leapsome focuses on employee productivity and engagement. How do you think AI can contribute to fostering these qualities? And what are some practical steps that leaders can take to enable people enablement? And we talked about this and behavior change being a huge issue. So take it away.
I'm very happy to. I mean, ultimately, if we think about it, no company can ultimately execute their strategy without having a high-performing and productive organization and managers that actually really help you implement that strategy and actually execute it on the ground. And if we look at what happened, particularly in the past years, as we see managers' workloads have increased drastically. Over the past year, 70% of managers report their workload has increased even more. And in
Could
HR,
do with the layoffs, perhaps,
exactly,
in tech? Yeah.
Exactly. And HR teams have also been pretty hard hit by a lot of the layoffs. So we have HR teams and managers as a key sort of lever within your organization to ultimately help you build a high-performing organization and execute also big change initiatives, such as truly leveraging AI across an organization. So the question is, how do we make their jobs easier? How do we help them to automate processes? How do we help them to take better decisions based on truly understanding the data, but also generating action plans from them? And that's ultimately what we do with Leapsome. We help companies to truly understand their performance, their engagement, what's working in the company, what's not working, and what's holding managers back. And we've developed tools. Let's make it very tangible that help help an HR organization build out a performance strategy, a career path, analyze thousands of survey comments at the sort of blink of an eye, and turn those into personalized action plans that really help you to work with the data, but then also to turn it into action. And for managers, we've developed an AI co-pilot that actually helps managers that are under all this workload and stress to take better decisions, to take the contextual data of their team, the goals, and help them to run more effective one-on-one meetings, have hard conversations, and to truly find the right actions based on the data from their organization to execute better in their role as managers. So it's truly making it easier to understand the data, but then also work with the data on top of automating certain processes in the back.
Carmine, turning it to you. So obviously, AI adoption requires more than just tools, right? When you are leadership, and continuing off from what Jenny just said, how can you enable behavioral change and make sure that people are adopting these tools as well? They're just not there, and you're not just hey, figure it out, but you're actually creating a strategy and game plan for people to use. Just to give you an example, my husband works in finance. They're not supposed to use ChatGPT, and he does it on the fly because, you know what, it helps him in certain aspects, right? And a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people aren't because they're scared because of these mandates. So how can you, in a leadership position, identify a path ahead and make sure people are adopting it?
Yeah. So to begin with, I think it's part of your job description. If you define yourself as being a leader, you must have an ability to look around the corner. And if you are one of those leaders that says, hey, by the way, I'm antagonizing AI adoption, you're missing the boat. And worse than that, the boat will be missed by everyone together with you supposed to be on that boat. So to your point, to me, the definition of the leaders comes with an incumbency of making sure you have an ability to take the right gamble on the future. And in these particular circumstances, the bet is around AI. AI is not going to disrupt everyone. AI is going to disrupt those that don't use AI. So to your husband examples, which resonate with me a lot, because I've been also for many years in the finance world, good luck to those companies and those employees that are not adopting AI. So then what is the trick to drive the adoption? Well, change the leader. So that's trick number one.
Fire your
exactly. So
executives.
You should use a Jenny's product to have a proper tough discussion with Mr. Leader. And the second component, I'm very long in the way I talk through the inclusiveness in the culture, not only in my company, it's even the way I live by. If you start talking through the people and you start explaining to them that there's only one constant out there, and that constant is the change,
Yep.
and you make those people to embrace the change for the greater good of the change, right? Change is not necessarily a bad thing. In many situations, it's a good thing. That's the way to go and instill into the people the change culture mentality, which I'm not trying to be simplistic. I know it's very hard. To her point, she's right. It takes a lot of change management, which is
Right.
painful just to hear. Imagine when you need to go and execute. But it's inevitable. Those that don't do it, they're going to miss the plot.
Yeah. This is an open-ended question for either of you, but another sort of hesitation perhaps could be linked to a lot of the ethical concerns that enterprises have around AI models, right? Whether it's hallucinations or data privacy or, bias. According to you, what do you think has been top of mind for your customers, and how do you address them?
I mean, I think maybe to build also on your last answer and address that question, I think we need to actually be very intentional around where we actually even deploying the AI tools in a way that they can really be truly effectively used by our organizations. And I mean, ultimately, I think we have sort of three different options, right? We could go straight to the LLM layer and start sort of prompting there and try to get our use cases done there, which for the end user might mean there's a lot of prompting, a lot of contextual data I have to feed into the model to actually get a sufficiently good answer, or go to very, very narrow platforms, or take sort of the platform layer, like Leapsome is a people platform, right? A people process platform. And I think the advantage you have at that layer is that you ultimately have contextual data. So you actually have the data that's sort of sitting on top of the sort of original LLM that helps you to generate more relevant and effective responses for the user, which actually also gives like a more direct gratification effect, because I get a good answer, I actually get something that's truly helpful for me. And I think at that layer, what you also have as an advantage is you can actually continue to sort of like have certain visibility rights. So for example, like depending on your role and rights, you would see a very different answer because the platform knows what sort of like contextual data can actually be used to give you a relevant answer, which I think this is something that's really, really powerful. And I think from an adoption perspective, what's very important is people don't necessarily know how to use like an empty prompt field, right? They need ways to actually figure out like, what can I use this for? What is actually like useful? So what we've realized, but also I hear this from a lot of other sort of folks building product, is you need to provide the user with relevant questions, like smart actions to really make it sort of like accessible. And then you can also control, especially in the beginning, because this technology is constantly evolving, that you actually can give the most relevant sort of like best outcomes. You can to some extent reduce the risk of hallucination, because you already sort of like know what kind of use cases might make the most sense for the user and optimize for those to get really the best sort of like results. I think it's just like, what layer do we speak about? I think actually makes a really, really important difference in the experience for the user, but also the actual impact to the business.
Carmine, do you have anything to add?
So the ethical question around AI and its application and the way, what it will look like once it's deployed into a company stack, to me is addressed in two ways. So question number one is the data integrity, right? And the data integrity is what you AI provider are really doing with the data of the customers. Over there is no hallucination that is allowed, right? You need to be absolutely tight, and your AI has to, do the right thing, period, then full stop.
Yeah, there's like a huge number of enterprise search companies that are coming up that basically promise to address this issue.
Correct. So this point, especially if you want to work with large enterprises, is non-negotiable. And the second component, so once you address the data integrity, the data lake, or the ecosystem around the data for the clients, which, as I said, is not something that you can take it a light heart. The second component is what you really do with those data. And what I can tell you pretty firmly, nobody likes to hear, hey, don't worry, I'm going to look after your data, I'm going to train my model. So that's a dead end, right? So you need to show up, your product has to show up in the company's tech stack also having an ability to have very distinguished set of data that belongs to the client, are being accurate to the client, and those are data for the client.
Right.
That's, to me, what has to be worked around the ethics of the AI, knowing that the AI will hallucinate. But if the hallucination is done for the sake of the LLM having a certain type of hallucination, but no wrongdoing is done around the data, I think everything else in between is permissible.
Yeah. So we have two use cases here, right? Where we've talked about strategic planning, we've talked about people and processes. What, according to you two, are use cases within the enterprise that you really shouldn't rely on AI for or AI-driven insights for?
I mean, honestly, I think with all the processes we empower, it's always like keeping a human in the loop, right? So it's like performance management, like maybe taking hard decisions from that. We're not on the hiring side, but I think that's a similar sort of like use case where you want to use AI capabilities like analyzing data, understanding sort of like the data, helping you make decisions, but you always just want to keep the human in the loop and not actually just defer to the machine to take the ultimate decision. So I think that's very, very important for everything that involves like people decisions, management decisions, which I think is definitely a line that we should maintain for now.
So when it comes to strategic initiatives and strategy in general, nothing is going to be better than the human gut in many parts, right? So if you let the AI to ask that question on your behalf, what I'm supposed to do if I need to run a transformation, you're going to get a baseline. So if your job is, as I said, the theory of victory that allow you to experience what is a theory around what can deliver non-linear growth, you human, you need to come up with your own version of your own right question. And that's the type of investment we ask our clients, right? If there is an AI that not only is going to do the workflow for you and doing all the accuracy and execution of whatever comes, but also is asking the right question, then either you are in the wrong place or you're in the wrong company or both, right? So the human is amplified in the notion of remove all the stuff which are not necessarily going to drive alpha, we call it. Just focus on what is the right question to ask. What is their hypothesis that is underlining your strategic initiatives or your strategy that is going to move the needle in such a disproportionate way so that you can achieve the high growth potential that you deserve?
So I obviously work for LinkedIn News, and LinkedIn has this whole hypothesis around how we're going from a jobs-based to a skills-based economy. And skills are going to be a lot more impactful and an important differentiator, particularly in the AI world. So on the question of skills, what skills do you believe, Jenny, leaders and HR teams need to develop internally to fully harness AI's potential? And how do you build those competencies?
I mean, I think it's interesting because something we also discussed internally, to what extent, like, how do we even hire for AI capabilities, right? To some extent, to your point, like, every manager plays an important role, every leader plays an important role, ultimately every IC plays an important role in being part of how you adopt AI across your product, your go-to-market motion, your internal operations. And so I think really figuring out what skills are the best determinant of people's success, and I think curiosity matters. Having a growth mindset matters. I think still empathy matters, because I think that's to the whole...
All soft skills, which keep coming up over and over again, which is funny, right? Because we're automating everything and everyone's like, human soft skills are the best.
Yeah. And I think the other one is probably also like underrated communication skills, because I think a lot of the adoption gap we're seeing is linked to unclarity and maybe to some extent intransparency within companies as to what we're actually trying to achieve with our AI strategy and where we're heading. So I think it's very, very important also as we go into the next year to clarify as every business, like, what is our AI strategy? Like, what does it mean on the product side, but also on the go-to-market side, on the internal operations side, and thereby helping people to understand it, buy into it, and closing that adoption gap. So I think everything that was true about good leadership beforehand is even more important in these times of managing this huge, sort of not just technological, but also human change.
So if you allow me to get out with my Mediterranean background.
Yes, please.
Go for it.
So I like to split between the skills and abilities.
Okay.
The skills is something that you can absolutely train. 10,000 hours you learn language, 5,000 hours you do something. Perfect. That's the zone for AI. If we're talking of skills, good luck to the skilled people, because there is a chance, high chance, that an AI is going to come after you.
Yeah.
Okay? When instead there is a bifurcated view, and is really the territory of human with our limitation is the ability. Abilities are not coachable. So for example, having a good communication skill and ability to connect with people, it's very hard to coach, right?
Well,
That's what
math for me. Right. I could do it, but then I'll get, a bad stomach.
This tells me that you gave up on maths. But
Mm-hmm.
so the point I'm trying to make is inside the spectrum of those abilities, which are very hard to coach, there is no 10,000 hours. That's what the parents do with their own children. They're sitting there and they're, giving them all the culture coming from the legacy of the family. Same managers. So there's a bunch of abilities which are incredibly hard to coach, and in fact, they're not coachable. This is the territory where I think there is the real future for those leaders, having an ability to jump on those abilities which are exclusive to human.
So you're saying differentiate between your skills and abilities, double down on your abilities.
Totally, yes.
Very interesting perspective. I'm going to open it up to audience questions now. I'm sure I can go on and on asking you more, Carmine, about your Mediterranean beliefs.
Excellent.
But we're going to open it up to the audience now. What are some of the biggest differences that you found between leaders and managers that embrace AI versus those that don't?
I'm happy to start. I think the biggest differentiator is actually in which organization they work in. And I think that links to the question of, in order to actually sort of like really disseminate a successful AI strategy, I think you need very clear leadership guidance, like clarity, transparency as what you're trying to do. You need training as to like generate like joint understanding, aha moments, excitement. Then the third one is you need sort of role modeling or best practice sharing. So, and the fourth one is tools, ways to change habits. So those are like the fundamental things that ultimately drive that change. But I think that's actually even more important, the environment in which these managers and leaders operate, than like one frontline manager versus another frontline managers. Obviously at that layer there's also differences, and I think it comes really back to the curiosity. It comes back to maybe growth mindset, like I'm not just afraid this is going to eat my job away, but I actually see the opportunity this brings for me, my team, to actually ultimately drive outcome. And I think the third one is like really maybe also a tiny element of time, because I think what we underestimate maybe at times as leaders is it's a massive like driver for productivity in the long run, but there's a first element of I need to make an investment of understanding,
you're
of changing.
Eating into your time.
Exactly, I might be working towards a target. 50% of my salary is based on how I achieve that. So I think that's maybe that risk appetite to actually make that initial investment for the later ROI.
Do you think, Jenny, that also has a role to play in that sort of hesitation we were talking about, all these studies showing recently?
So I mean, we've done some recent research. We surveyed 2,500 managers and HR professionals across North America and Europe, and 80% of managers say they use AI at least weekly, often daily, and only 40% or 42% of employees say they actually use AI on a regular basis. And I think it's really this, make it clear what you're trying to do, train the folks, share best practices. Why did this seller hit like 100+% of their quota by leveraging the technology that they have at their hand? Why is this manager more effective leveraging the Leapsome co-pilot than others? And then also making sure people have the right tooling at the right layer, right, where the process, the habits are being built.
Kind of related question, and maybe Carmine, you can take this first, but what are the skills that you think are less important for managers in the age of AI? And what do you do with people in your organization who are heavily indexed on those skills, which are now less valuable? Very scary question.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I said. I mean, I'm adamant, and when I sit with the people that work with me, we really go through, okay, this is a skills versus this is an ability. And literally we're trying to automate those skills as much as we can. I can give you a very interesting example. So one of our new initiatives of our HR people, she's running the NPS for the company, amazing results were in. So we spoke around what is that skill that...
The net promoter score.
Correct,
Yeah.
sorry, the net promoter score for the company. I was like, what is the thing you're doing after once the data are in? Well, I'm going to look at the data, do the stuff, whatever, publishing. It was a series of skills, very important, that can be easily automated. Guess what happened? She made a podcast being completely done by an AI, which was as good as the same quality that she can pull off in hours and hours, so that she can work on more abilities, which indeed are, in the context of HR, her capacity of understanding what's going on and checking on the culture of the business. So imagine that one of the stuff that our people HR team does is responsible for the culture, making sure that culture is not only respected, but is also enforced. That's an ability, because it requires you a connection, a very deep connection with everyone around the organization to go after. Those are the type of things which have to be major in the next gen leadership.
Jenny, do you have anything to add? What skills are less attractive?
I mean, just to build on that example, to make it very tangible, like within our platform, you can have survey comments instantaneously summarized within a second, and an action plan built on that. And that would have taken maybe an HR department a week beforehand. And now they can spend the time to tweak it, to personalize it, to communicate it, to make sure it's actually being done. And I think this shows how getting rid of sort of like lower order skills unlocks this huge potential to actually drive better impact.
Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of our panel. I could go on and on. There's so much to discuss, but follow Carmine and Jenny for their insights, and follow my newsletter on LinkedIn. It's called Tech Stack. Thank you, and I will hand it over for the afternoon session after a break.